In the last century, a conflict emerged that quickly became one of the most complicated and controversial conflicts in the world, a dispute between two peoples over the same land. To understand the origins of the conflict, let's trace the history of the Jewish people on the map. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict will be explained in a later section. The story begins in the year 750 BCE, when the Near East was divided into several small kingdoms and city-states. City-state, a state consisting of a single city. These states were trapped between the Assyrian Empire in the north and Egypt in the south. Among them was the kingdom of Israel, whose people worshipped several gods, including the god Yahweh. In 722 BCE, the capital of Israel, Samaria, fell to the Assyrian Empire. Part of the population fled to the kingdom of Judah and Jerusalem. However, the Assyrian army pursued them as it continued its expansion southward. The region remained under their control for a century until Nineveh fell to the Babylonians. Both Egypt and Babylon competed for the lands of the former Assyrian Empire, but the Babylonians quickly seized the lands, bringing them under their influence. Jerusalem resisted this new power and declared a rebellion. The Babylonian army returned to besiege and destroy the city, expelling a large portion of the population to the capital, Babylon. In 539 BCE, the Achaemenid Persian Empire took control of Babylon. The new king granted the Jews permission to return, which encouraged many of them to return to Jerusalem. They rebuilt the city and laid the foundation for Jewish culture by building Solomon's temple and writing the Torah. In 334 BCE, the ambitious young Macedonian king, Alexander the Great, set out with his army to conquer the known world. In less than 10 years, he conquered vast territories and built several cities named Alexandria. After completing his conquests, he died at the age of 32 in Babylon, leaving no heir to the throne. Alexander's empire was divided by his generals into different Greek kingdoms. Judah came under control of the Ptolemaic kingdom, and the Jewish community settled in the newly founded city of Alexandria, where the Torah was translated into Greek. After a war against the Seleucid kingdom, the Seleucids were a Hellenistic dynasty founded by Seleucus I, one of Alexander's generals. Hellenistic and Jewish cultures developed side by side, to the point where one of the altars of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem was dedicated to the worship of Zeus. A fanatical Jewish militia, opposed to Hellenism, took control of Jerusalem in 164 BCE. The temple was restored, and the kingdom of Judah became independent. A century later, the Roman army occupied the region. Judah organized two major revolts against the new Roman regime, but they were violently crushed. The first revolt in 66 CE led to the siege of Jerusalem, followed by the destruction of the temple. The only remaining part of the wall, known as the Western Wall, was left standing. In the second revolt, the city was destroyed and many people were killed. This time, the Jews were prevented from safely returning to Judah. Many of them migrated to Hebron and other places within the empire. At the end of the Roman Empire, Christianity became the dominant religion, and Jerusalem became a pilgrimage destination for Christians. The very wealthy Jewish community in the Mediterranean basin faced persecution, particularly in the Gothic and Byzantine empires. In the 7th century CE, Islam emerged, followed by the Islamic conquests. Jews sometimes supported the Muslims in hopes of improving their conditions. The Arabs tolerated the Jews while only converting the polytheistic peoples to Islam. The Dome of the Rock Mosque was built in Jerusalem, making the city sacred to the three Abrahamic faiths. The Arabs reached the Iberian Peninsula and named it Al-Andalus. In Al-Andalus, 5% of the population was Jewish, and they entered the Islamic golden age of culture and science. During this time, Jews were allowed to trade between Catholics and Muslims in Europe, which gradually enabled them to establish themselves across parts of Western Europe. In the 11th century, the Seljuk Turks from Central Asia expanded and reached Jerusalem. Christians were persecuted and prevented from making pilgrimages to the city. In response, Christians in Europe organized the Crusades, which were military and religious campaigns to the Holy Land. Along the way, they massacred Jewish communities, accusing them of being guilty for killing Christ. In 1347, Genoese and Kaffa traders from the Crimean Peninsula brought the Black Plague to Europe. Over the next 5 years, the plague spread, devastating Europe and killing nearly half of its population. A rumor spread that Jews were poisoning wells, which led to persecution of Jews along the Rhine and Rhone valleys, and they were eventually expelled. In Spain, the Reconquista Wars ended, and Catholic monarchs gave Jews an ultimatum to either convert to Christianity or leave the newly established Spain. The majority chose to leave and settle along the Mediterranean coast, especially in the Ottoman Empire, where they were welcomed. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth became a refuge for Jews from Western Europe due to favorable immigration policies. In the 17th century, the region hosted more than 300,000 Jews, nearly half of the world's Jewish population. But in 1648, everything changed with the Cossack peasant uprising in Ukraine against the nobility and the Jews. They accused the Jews of having a special relationship with the ruling nobility. Over 100,000 Jews were killed or fled the area. This event weakened the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which was soon surrounded by neighboring powers. Over the next 150 years, the region fell and its lands were divided. The Jewish community split, with 900,000 of them finding themselves in the Russian Empire, in an unwelcome place. They soon became target of attacks called pogroms, a Russian term meaning devastation. As authorities did not respond, these attacks grew more frequent and deadly. Jews then migrated to the United States and Western Europe, where their living conditions improved. The first Zionist Congress was held in Basel in 1897, hoping to establish a new homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine. The Ottoman Empire strongly opposed the project. Several years later, World War I broke out, and the Ottoman Empire fought on the side of Germany. As the Allies became involved, they sought additional support. The British Foreign Secretary at the time, Arthur Balfour, wrote an open letter promising a Jewish homeland in Palestine in exchange for Jewish support, along with support for the Arab Revolution against the Ottoman Empire. He also promised the Arabs independence in the liberated lands. At the end of the war, the map of the Middle East was redrawn and divided among European powers. Palestine came under British mandate, marking the beginning of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.